Hey, Brad Squad, Yonathan Elias here with Saloua Ibaline, the certified business coach, marketing expert, and author of the recently published book, The Stories of Immigrant Women Entrepreneurs in the United States of America. Saloua, how you doing? I love your name,
I'm
by the
good.
way. I
Thank
love
you.
the name. Thank you for joining us today. First of all, let's talk about yourself. Saloua, where does this name come from? Let us know about your immigration story.
Sure. So I'm originally from Morocco. I was born there as well. And then I grew up in Belgium. So when I was a toddler, my mom and dad divorced, and then I ended up moving to Belgium with my mother, and we were sadly separated from my brothers and sister, and I didn't meet them until I was 14. And this was a
Wow.
big shock. Yeah, because I grew up as a only child, but my mom remarried eventually, and I got a sister from a second marriage. But my brothers and sister, I met them really when I was 14. And I remember this was really shocking because I was like, oh, but they look like me, but I don't know these people.
You guys have the same mom and dad. Now, why was it you that was picked to go with your mother? How did that separation occur?
Yeah. So for a long time, I actually didn't know. It was very strange. So based on what my mom told me, so my dad and my mom married very young. My mom was 14. My dad was 21. It was a arranged marriage because back in the 70s and 60s, that's what you were doing, especially in the small villages of Morocco. So they
Mhm.
got married. It was not a marriage of love. It was just cultural. So after my mom got married with my father, they moved to his house with his family. And at that point, women don't really have much say. So you cook, you clean, you have children, and that's it. The foundation were already off. They ended up having 4 kids. My dad was not a faithful man, and he ended up meeting another woman, and he got her pregnant while my mom was pregnant of me. And then eventually he divorced my mom to go on with this other woman. Because a woman didn't have much rights back then, what happens is if a woman with children is divorced, she has to go back to live with her parents, which is a really bad image for that woman. It's very hard to get remarried after that. So
Mm.
she moved to her father. Her father had 2 wives, and it was perfectly legal back then as long as you take care of them. So they were both my grandmother and my other grandmother. They were living together, but the other woman didn't want my mom back. So it was a lot of struggle. She stayed there for a whole year, really being depressed. And so her only way out was to go live at her sister's house, who was in France. And back then, the borders between Morocco and France were open. Because I don't know if you know, but Morocco is a former French colony. So they had like some agreements. So my mom moved there in hopes to bring the children with her. But the last minute, my father decided to take the children, and he cut the pages of the passport of my brothers and sisters, and he only kept me with my mom. And the only reason it's because I was a baby and I was still
Right.
breastfeeding, and he just didn't want to deal with that. My sister was 7 years apart and my brother is 11 years. So he kept those kids. And then I was the only one that went to Europe. And for the longest, I thought this was terrible. But then I realized how grateful I am and privileged, because
Yeah.
that allowed me to do so much things moving forward, including the life I have today.
So, speaking of you growing up in Europe, how was the experience different as being an immigrant in Belgium versus America?
I can totally speak about that because I'm twice an immigrant. The first time I didn't choose to be an immigrant, but the second time I did. And also I was an adult, so there's a lot of difference. When I was a kid, I think the biggest challenge for me as an immigrant kid in Belgium is lots of racism. And when you're a kid, you don't understand racism. You just see that you're not welcome. So I used to fight a lot in school. So I had to defend myself from fight. And
Mm.
so I would get kicked out, and my sister the same. We moved in Belgium in the 80s, and we went to a small village where we were the only Arabs. It was terrible. And then I had a unibrow and a lot of hair in
Of
my
course,
face.
yeah.
So they were making fun of me all the time. But when we moved to Belgium, so my mom went to stay with her sister, and then she was really planning to bring her children back. She was at a crossroad because now you have to think about, do I go to Europe to have a better life and then eventually bring my children back? Or do I stay and I have no rights and no way out? So she took that leap of faith and then eventually got remarried with my stepdad, who was worse than my father. He was an abusive alcoholic man. And that's why it's something that I talk about today in my coaching, is like you really attract what you think you deserve. And that's
Mm.
what she did. She attracted another guy who was not good. And out of that union, my youngest sister was born. But because he was so traumatic and he was very violent, eventually we were saved by the social services. So neighbors kept calling the police. They would come in when my stepdad was at work, and my mom didn't speak the language. So first time they came in, she couldn't speak to them. So they came back when he was at work with a translator. And then she would explain, we don't have money for this. We don't have Pampers for the kids. This is the situation we live in. And he eventually found out and he was really upset. So the social services moved us into women's shelter. And we lived in women's shelter. We moved there in 1987 and we moved out almost at the end of 1989. And I know that because I went back as I was writing this book, and I went back there and I met the social workers, and there was,
wow.
They didn't recognize me, but I recognized them.
Yeah,
You know,
of
they
course.
just got
Yeah.
older. And I did everything. I went to see my dad. I went to see my the women's shelter. I went to see my foster family. I did
Yeah.
everything. It was very healing and important to write the story.
So how was that revisiting
Yeah.
Belgium and Morocco for you?
For me, Belgium is also my country. I only left Belgium when I was 20 years old to move to the US. So I consider myself Belgium as well. And I went back every year to see my mom. What I did this year that was very different is I lived 6 months in Morocco. Now, mind you, I never lived in Morocco.
Right. Yeah.
This is my first time going to Morocco as an adult, and I got an apartment. I was like, I'm just totally trying to learn the system. And what I found out about Morocco is two things. Number one, the country is beautiful. So much resources, fruits, vegetables in abundance. I mean, the beauty of Morocco is exceptional. However, the mindset of the people is very difficult to deal with. And with that said, I felt really like a stranger. And so today I'm 38 and I'm like born in Morocco, raised in Belgium, live in the US. I don't feel like I have an identity. I don't know where I'm from. I don't feel like I could be completely Belgium. I'm not 100% Moroccan. My blood is. I speak the language, but when I speak it, I speak with an accent. People know I'm foreigner. And same here. When I'm here, people be like, well, where are you from? Where? I don't know. Moroccan, Belgium. If I say I'm from Belgium, they look at me like, but before that. And here, if I say I'm from Africa, people also are confused. Like, they expect me to be either darker skin or from, Central Africa. So I get all this confused say.
Yeah. So what was the story about you immigrating to the USA?
Growing up in Belgium, because my mom, after the women's shelter, she had to find her way. And then she got into her first studio apartment, she started cleaning people's home. And she really started working really hard. And I saw that as a kid. But eventually she was struggling so much because she had two of us here and then three in Morocco. It's 5 children that she had to take care of. She had to find a way to help her. And she decided to put us in a foster family. So now the foster family was only part-time. It was a Caucasian couple who were educated, and they really gave us a lot of great foundation for me later on in life. Wow. We went to theater, we went to horseback riding, we had bikes, we were going to museums. So this is really what I think helped me out, break that cycle of ended up, I don't know, many things could have happened to me. I could have been depressed. I could have been in drugs. So many things. But instead, we really got this foundation with them, and they taught us how to write better because we were a mess in school. We were dealing with racism and all this fights, and we didn't really care about education because we thought survival. They helped us out for 6 years. And when I started to become a teenager, I was very rebellious, and we ended it. It was really our fault because at that point, I didn't want them in our lives. So we totally lost contact until last year, which is crazy. So over 25 years ago. So my immigrant story was because I knew I wanted better things for myself and my family. The only thing I could think of is to do something really big, especially because I was a female from a Muslim background, from a single mother with no money. I needed to prove myself and to my culture that I was worth it and I could do things to change the game. And the only thing I could see was United States. And to make it even worse, I picked New York City. I literally have nothing, no papers. I didn't speak English. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any contacts. But my eyes, I remember this till this day, I was so ready and I wanted to make it happen. So I did just that.
It's almost like you took after your mother with, taking a leap of faith, you see?
Exactly. And you know what? I only realized this years later. I was like, oh my God, I'm repeating the cycle. My journey to New York really was so much struggle and challenges for an immigrant woman. And honestly, if I had to do it all over again at my age today, I wouldn't know.
Wow.
It was too much. But I'm also grateful that I've done this because my whole life is now very different and I have opportunities that I wouldn't have if didn't leave. So my immigration story, I arrived in New York. I was like, okay, now what? We got to figure out a way to stay here. And so first thing I did is I applied to be an au pair, a full-time nanny, and it worked. So they gave me a visa for a year.
What kind of visa were you on when you came?
So I first started with a tourist visa because with Belgium, you could have 3 months to travel to the US as a tourist. And so while I was on the tourist visa, I applied for the J1 visa, which was the visa for au pair, and that was 1 year. But here's the thing, it didn't work out. It was a terrible pairing. The family and I wouldn't get along. That was just one woman, actually. Her husband had died and she had inherited his fortune. So she lived in a big mansion in Connecticut, and she had 3 kids and they were all teenagers. So I felt like, why am I even here? So it didn't work out at all. And what she did, and I honestly, for the longest, I was very hurt and mad. But then when time goes on, I forgive. But she basically gave me 2 hours to leave. And she called the agency and she said, she's a danger for our family. What? So 2 hours to pick up my stuff, and I didn't have enough time to pick up everything. And they dropped me off at the train station and I didn't know where to go. So what I did is I took the train to New York City, and on my way to New York, it was about 3 or 4 hour train ride. I had a flip phone and I just tried to contact everybody I knew to see if there was a contact in the US I could go to. I actually did find someone. 2 of my girlfriends from Belgium were actually in New York for the fashion week. What a coincidence. And they were both staying in Newark, which was like a bad area back then. And they were sharing a room, 3 of them. And then I joined them. And that was the beginning of me trying to figure out my next move. And I was still on the visa, but the visa was going to be canceled at any time soon because, I'm not in the family anymore, but I know I had a couple of weeks to figure it out. So from there, I still went through my contacts, and then I found out another contact I have, and this is crazy. So when I was in Belgium, at the age of 17 to 20, I worked as a bartender in a nightclub. And the nightclub was owned by an Albanian family who happened to have the cousin who owns a restaurant in Edgewater, New Jersey. So I called them, and I was so good to them, and I had a great relationship with them that they called the cousin and said, listen, you need to help out Saloua and her 2 friends, because then I brought my 2 friends with me. And we arrived at this French restaurant. It was so fancy. Like we came from sleeping on the floor to this beautiful place. And the manager came out and he goes, which one of you is Saloua? And I said, that's me. And he goes, my cousin spoke highly of you. And then for the next month or so, they actually helped me out. Not only that, later on, they sponsored me for my papers. Then I changed my visa yet, but I had to go back to Belgium to change it. But they sponsored me to go to English school. So that was my next level visa. And I think it's the F1 for English as a second language. I didn't have the money, and you had to prove that you had at least $10,000 in your bank account. And they did that. I got my first visa for English school. And then they gave me an apartment above the restaurant and a job. And I worked as a bartender, and I was able to pay for rent and school. And that lasted for about 2 years. So I changed from English school to the other school. So from there, I knew that after the English school, I had to go to college if I needed to stay in the country. I didn't really care much for college, but I knew this was the only way to have a couple of years to figure out my next move. The problem with college is that it costs a lot of money. And again, I was working bartending a couple of nights and I was really struggling. So I met this one girl. She's also from Belgium, and she did the same thing as me, except she moved to LA. And we connected in New York. And she was there 5 years before me. So she had already her papers. But at that point, she got a scholarship from NYU. And they were giving her, I think, $25,000 or something. And they actually gave her the money on the bank account. So she said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to apply for college. Now, I tried to apply to so many colleges and they wouldn't take me because I didn't have a GPA, I think. Yeah.
A GPA. So for anybody who's watching who doesn't know what a GPA is. So it's a grade point average. So it's an average of your classes together.
So I didn't have a GPA to say, and I didn't know I should have said I don't have one. Instead, in the paperwork, they said I had 0 GPA.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, we don't have GPA in Europe. It's like, sorry. So they basically said, you don't have a GPA, you have 0 GPA. Normally, I should have never said anything. I should have just applied as a new student. But instead, I didn't do that. I just brought my paperwork. It was just a whole mess. I didn't know. So finally, what happened is I found another school that had an immigration department for international students. And that was another college I found in New York City. So what happened with my friend is that she said, okay, in order to get into school, we needed to get at least $10,000 on a bank account to prove that I could support myself as a student in New York. So she said, I'm going to transfer the money from my scholarship into your bank account. And then you're going to present that to the school. And then when you get that, you transfer the money back into my bank account. So you see, that's trust right there. I could have just taken the money and go. But instead, I did just that. I was like, I can't believe this working. So I'll go back to Belgium. And then I go to the embassy in Brussels and I have an extensive interview. Why do you want to be in the US? Why do you want to go to blah, blah, blah? And then you have to say that you want to learn the culture, learn English, and then come back and apply this in Belgium. And so after my interview, I'm like, I'm never going to get this. And then I sat in the room and then they called my name and they give me my passport back. It's like, thank you, have a good day. I didn't open the passport. I leave the embassy and, they search you, they put powders in your hand. It's like this whole thing. And I get out of the embassy and then I randomly look at my passport. I'm like, I hope I got a year. And you know how long they gave me?
How many?
5 years.
Wow.
And when I got this, I was like, oh, I was so excited and at the same time terrified because I didn't know how to pay for college. So I'm super excited. I come back to New York. I go to school. And the first mistake I made, which I didn't know until way later, is that I actually lived in New Jersey and I went to college in New York, which I paid a lot of money for out of state.
Out of state.
And I was right there. I could have just moved here or go to college in New Jersey. I didn't know it. You have all the out of state taxes, out of state, everything.
Horrible.
Crazy. And then the other thing is international students pay almost 3 times as what a regular American student would pay for tuition. That's a lot of money. So without the right to work. And then the third mistake I made, they purposely gave me the schedule, and I didn't know this, that my schedule, if it was a different schedule, so morning or afternoon, you paid $900 a month difference. They gave me the higher one. Yes, I found this later, and I was trying to send out letters, but nobody cared. And then another thing they did is they put me at level 1 English to get an extra semester into my studies, which I fought back and I finally got rid of that extra semester. And I was already 2 years in the US and I was with the basic level English. I don't want to be in this level. So I repassed the exam and they removed. But I think all of this is like, because to me, they were trying to take money out, as much money as they could. And then another thing is that they never asked me how I paid for school. So what I did, honestly, I've done all the job, you name it. I worked at coffee shops, bodegas. I even sold cars. I did nannies. I did everything I could, all of that while I was building my business as a coach. So I got certified as a life coach and certified as a business coach. And it's a very difficult business because we have to build an audience. You have to build trust. You have to build credibility. It takes a while. And then I actually belly dance my way up. What I mean by that is when I was so broke, I'm walking on the street in Manhattan and I see a restaurant. And this woman, white woman, I'm sorry to say, she was like blonde, blue eyes, and she was me in the restaurant. And people were throwing money. Yes. And I was like, this is my culture. I know how to do this. And I'm like, why didn't I think of this? So I was like, oh my God, this really opened up my eyes. So I grabbed newspaper and I looked at all the Arab restaurant, Greek, anything. And I called them and I said, hey, can I come and audition for free? I'll dance for you for free. And they said, yes. I had $200 on a card. I ordered a costume from Brussels. I told my sister, you have to buy this and send it to me. So she sent me this orange costume, which was ugly. And I wore this with a fake ponytail. And then I was like, we are going to do this. And then I got the job. I ended up doing this for almost 4 to 5 years with my cocktail waitress job. And I did almost 300 shows per year. That's how busy I got. Yeah, I worked with a Jordanian singer who was taking me on all the weddings. People love the weddings. So then I learned more and more. And yeah, I was doing pool parties, Indian weddings. The Indians, they love me. And that really saved me because I was able to pay for college and my papers and my rent and all of that. So eventually 2012, I graduated with a business degree. I brought my mom here. And then I never really worked for corporate America, except I started my own business right away.
Oof, that's a story.
So fast forward, after I graduated from college, there was this woman who got me a job when I was just got to the US in the restaurant. She was one of the partner of the restaurant I was working at. And she was really amazing. And they were really wealthy and influential people in New Jersey. So when the time came of my visa to end, I contacted her and I said, look, my visa is going to end this year and I really need help. Can we talk? And she said, okay, come to my office. I was terrified. So I go from New York to New Jersey. basically what I was asking her is to sponsor me for my green card. And then she looked at me, she said, you deserve it. She said, but you have to follow my conditions. And her condition was I had to use her own attorney. And then she said, you have to move in one of her apartments. So I accepted the deal. I moved to New Jersey. I remember her apartment was $1,200 in 2010, and I didn't have enough between college and working. And it's like, it was really struggling. So I got a roommate and we did that. And then I used her attorney, and it cost thousands and thousands of dollars for my papers, you know. But eventually I got my green card. And in 2014, it was November 3rd, 2014, this is when I became an American citizen.
Wow.
It was a long journey. It took me almost 10 years, you know.
So talk to us about this digital nomad.
The digital nomad started because my business was remote, and I think I was ahead of the game back then because I started in 2014-ish. And I was already using Zoom and I was already building my practice. But then I eventually got into a relationship in New York, and my ex and I really wanted to move to Phoenix, Arizona, and I followed him there. And there, my business was not taking off because nobody knew me as a coach. So I had to get a job. And that's the only corporate job I ever got. And I worked for Google. So I got a job at Google in Phoenix, which was really good. And that gave me the knowledge to learn more about digital marketing.
Yeah.
I was managing a book of millions of dollars with marketing agencies. We had extensive training. It was really, really stressful. When I left that job, I took that knowledge and I added the digital marketing into my business. That's the reason why I was able to be completely remote. So I was offering these services as well, Instagram ads, Facebook ads, and you name it, SEO, all this. And then when the relationship ended with my ex, I was like, what am I doing here? I want to see the world. I felt like I lost 15 years of my life, you know, struggle in New York. And that's when I said, I'm going back. And then the book idea came in, and I did this whole book while I was on the road. So I ran my business as a coach, and I worked on the book, which just been published, Stories of Immigrant Women Entrepreneurs. And in there, you have women from, I think, 22 countries living in 10 different states in the US and representing 5 different continents.
So being an immigrant is, probably a big part of your brand. How has that influenced your career?
Very much so, because with my coaching, I realized that I actually attract a lot of immigrant women. And that's when I was like, okay, I think that should be my market, because regular women in America is already a very difficult niche. But focus on an immigrant woman is actually give me an edge because I understand them and they can relate with me and they can see me as the woman that kind of paved the way. And I wish I had somebody like me when I was younger that I could relate to, but I really had to figure out a lot of it by myself. I think mentally, you need a certain strength to be able to manage a new country like the US. With nothing, it's very difficult. A lot of people give up and they leave.
How about as an immigrant entrepreneur? What were some of the challenges that you went through?
The main one, and I talk about this in the book, is about getting funded. I mean, we immigrants, we have no credit store. We have no... The credit system, that's something I'm still struggling with, but I got a lot better. But for the longest, we're like, why do we need debt to be more in debt? I don't get the system. In Europe, we're taught to only spend money you have. And if you don't have the money, you don't spend it. So I have a whole page here on investing in immigrant women entrepreneurs. So look at this. In the US, we have 1.9 million firms who are owned by Hispanic women. And do you know how much they generate in revenue?
How much?
$97 billion. Why are we not funded? And they hire 550,000 workers or employees. So there's so much to be made if people believed a little bit more in immigrants. Why? Because we are so ambitious. We see problems and we see how we can solve them. We find solution from them. We're not afraid of working hard.
What advice could you give for aspiring entrepreneurs?
If they really want to be an entrepreneur, first of all, it's not easy. It's not for everybody. But I really believe that everybody can start with a side hustle, your own business on the side. I think everybody should have some sort of other income, more than one income. Spend a lot of time learning. I've done this a lot. So between reading, going to conferences, and if you don't have much money to start with what you have. Find a mentor, find a support group, and then get involved in that. There's a lot of things you can do for free. And as you start making a little bit more money, then hire people who have the skills to teach you, because there's a big difference between the free stuff you can learn and somebody who can really show you exactly what you need to know for your business. What I also love about America and in the system is that it's one of the only few countries where you can have an idea. And if you're smart enough and work hard enough, you can really make it happen.
Now, what would you want people to learn more about from your book?
So the book was designing for 2 reasons. One, we wanted to inspire immigrants who are coming in this country and show the stories of other women who have done and paved the way, especially women who are here and are struggling or they thinking about giving up. And then the other one is to actually educate American borns about immigrants, but shedding the lights, positive lights on our stories. Because sadly, a lot of time when I hear immigrant story, I only hear things about, oh, illegal immigrants taking our job, crossing the borders illegally, trying to get our benefits and all of that nonsense. But I was like, do you know, all of these women are here legally. They all started a business and they all employing Americans and they are getting stuff done.
So now in 2019, immigrant entrepreneurs made up 21.7% of all business owners in the United States, despite making up just over 13.6% of the population and 17.1% of the U.S. labor force. This is according to newamericaneconomy.org. So how do you feel about that?
First of all, let's not forget that America is built on immigrants.
It's in the history.
No one is from here except the natives. No one. I also know, as a stats that I was doing on my book, 40% of businesses owned and operated by immigrants are in California. That's almost half of the economy is California.
What have you learned from writing this book?
Oh man, so many things. First of all, I never wrote a book before. I was like, and I had the vision. I was like, okay, we need to do this. And one thing that I learned is like, start with what you have today and then let the universe or whatever you call it support you. Because when you're really on a mission, things will develop for you. And it really did. The first thing I did is like, okay, I had a dream about this thing. I wrote some sort of a proposal. I'm like, okay. And then I put it out there. I was like, okay, who is interested in being interviewed for this? And I interviewed over 100 women to only feature 27. And then the second thing is like, okay, I'm going to start asking for help. So I was asking, can anybody here help me out with copy? And this one woman that I know is my friend. She's like, yeah, I went to, she has a master's degree. She's really good at this. I was like, can you help out with this? She's like, sure. Got on board for free, by the way.
Love it.
She got on board. This is hundreds and hundreds of hours of work. And then out of co-working space I joined, I met this woman who was a designer. She actually does books. I sent her the proposal. I'm like, look, I don't have money to pay you now, but if we make sales, I can do something for you. And she said, you know what? I love the project. I'm growing my portfolio. I'm in. She became the designer. Now we're a team of 3. Then in my digital nomad journey, I met this UK guy who's a copywriter in the UK, in London. And he wanted to proofread the book for free. And he also got part of the team. So now I developed a team of 3. You know, I value them highly. It's very important to tell people the story. And then to get funded, I got a GoFundMe page. I pitched a project. I made a video, and we got probably $2,000 out of that. And I was able to pay for a cover designer for this cover because I really wanted it to be this way. And little by little, you find people who really want to support you.
Oh, Saloua, what's next for you then?
I am actually going to do a workbook for this. Women can really use a how-to, you know? We're going to talk about immigration, mindset. And also, I found out a lot of immigrant women come here and they dim their lights because they don't think they speak English enough.
We need that. We need them to know this.
They have so much potential, and then we need them to live their mission and purpose. There's a woman in the book. She has an amazing business, and I'm talking, she makes well over $200,000 a year and her own business. And she still feels, she's like, as long as I have to work in it, I don't feel like I'm successful enough. I don't want to share my story.
So I remember you saying you interviewed hundreds of women. Now, what made you decide to pick the 27 that you chose?
We really wanted to know if the story was interesting and could inspire other people. And then we wanted a diversity. So we wanted to make sure we had people from each 5 continents, because we also knew this story would be different. So a woman coming from Cameroon will be different from a woman coming from Germany.
Wow.
Right. But also, I didn't put any numbers on this. I didn't say successful immigrant women entrepreneurs. Like, we have a woman here, she has a nonprofit and she's working for, you know, helping the rights of DACA recipients in Arizona. Among us work. She works with the government. She's like doing so much. But I didn't tap a number on this. She's a nonprofit. I didn't say, well, if you don't make 6 figures, then that would be a different book. So that's what I was really interested in. And let me say this, is very important. I think when people have a mission or a purpose and they know it, but they're afraid to do it, think about it this way. It is not about you anymore. It's about you putting out there your gift for others. Once you shift that mindset and think, okay, I have these skills, I want to put this out there so I can help other women like me to succeed. Like make it out about them, and then
Yeah.
it might be a difference.
What is your American dream? And do you feel like you have actually met it?
I think you'd be a bit disappointed with my answer.
No, I won't. I won't, just go. But like, I want to hear what you would say.
So when I first came here, I was really, my eyes were shiny and I was really hoping to reach this American dream. But as I got older and I went through so much stuff, I started not to believe in it anymore. So for me, the American dream, it was installed for the Americans who lived here in the 50s. And the American dream was get a house, a car, and a good paying job. For immigrants, it's a whole lot of different thing for us. We have to deal with the whole different things between, immigrations and getting your papers in order and be able to work legally. And you have to go through all these hoops before you even get your basic American rights. So for me, the reason why I do love America, it's because it gives us, if you're smart enough and if you work for it, it gives us the opportunities. They are there. You have to work for them, but they are there. And I think that's what I'm really grateful for. But other than that, there's a lot of things that I dislike about this country. And I only know that because I've traveled enough to compare and to realize, oh my God, the healthcare system. And what about the food system, the food industry in the US? And then when I start to think this way, I'm not sure what my views are on the American dreams. The only thing I can say is I love this country for its diversity, but also for the opportunities it's offer us if you're willing to put in the work and have patience.
That's a part of it. So where can people find your book?
Oh, sure. So first one, Amazon. And then the second place is on the website. And as far as me, you can find me on Instagram at Saloua Ibaline. I have a YouTube channel called Saloua Ibaline TV. And you can also find me on my website at salouaibaline.com. And people, tell them to message me if they bought the book, or even if they want to say hello. I'd love to learn about who's listening and what they learned from this. Please be in touch with me.
Saloua, thank you again so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Right.